When my husband found out that I couldn't inherit my father's estate, he yelled at me. "What? You can't inherit the property? I have no use for you anymore. I want a divorce right now." After that, I got my revenge on my husband and my sister, who remarried quickly. My name is Julie, and I am a 32-year-old office worker who has been married to Brian for 2 years. I met Brian through a relative's introduction, and we got married. My family was quite wealthy, but since my sister, Mary, and I were the only children, our relatives worried about finding an heir, so they introduced Brian, saying he would be fine as a son-in-law. Although my husband didn't end up becoming an adopted son-in-law, he started living with my family at my parents' house. My mother passed away a few years ago, and now my father, my husband, and I live in our family home. My husband seems very kind and treats my father well, but the relative who introduced him warned me about something right before our marriage. "I know I introduced Brian to you, but be careful. He can be a bit obsessed with money." Even though I was about to get married and had already done the engagement ceremony, I couldn't see any signs of my husband being money obsessed, so we went ahead and got married. Even after we married, I kept an eye on my husband because of the relative's words, but he didn't seem to be obsessed with money. However, he did seem curious about my father's wealth, sometimes casually asking how much property we had when he joined my father for a drink. Since my father didn't hide anything, I didn't worry about it too much. Another thing my husband was interested in was my sister. My sister is 5 years younger than me, and unlike my calm demeanor, she's bright and active and has a flashy social life with men. She doesn't look like me at all, and my husband was surprised when he first saw her. "Your sister is so different from you, Julie, isn't she?" Seeing my husband's fascination by my sister, who is a beautiful woman with striking features, opposed to my plain looks, made me feel a bit uneasy. Still, the reason our relatives introduced me to him was that they were worried I wouldn't get married due to my modest looks and personality, and then there would be no one to carry on our family name. At the time, I thought there was no need to worry since I had a beautiful sister, but I later realized why our relatives were concerned. My father spoiled my sister a lot, letting her go to college after high school and then to a vocational school after graduation. My sister didn't have any specific goals for attending college or vocational school. She just didn't want to work. My mother was strict with my sister, trying to persuade her to find a job after college, but my father insisted on sending her to a vocational school. After graduating from vocational school, my sister got a job at my father's friend's company, but quit after 6 months. I was shocked by the excuse my sister gave when she quit her job. "I can't fully use my talents at that company." My sister, who hadn't even worked for half a year, was acting as if she already understood everything about her job, which left my mother and me dumbfounded. However, my father seemed to believe my sister and quickly found her another job. A while after starting her new job, my mother fell ill and was hospitalized. When my mother was in the hospital, my sister visited her every day, taking time off work. In the end, she quit this job as well and started saying she would take care of our sick mother. Taking care, however, only meant being in the hospital room, chatting with our mother, or staring at her smartphone in the waiting room. I had to go get our mother's laundry and replace it with new clothes during her hospital stay, while my sister was of no help at all. Though my mother might have been happy to have someone to talk to, her condition worsened so much after about a month that she could no longer even have a conversation. 2 weeks after her condition worsened, our mother passed away. My father and sister were so shaken by the sudden loss that they couldn't even prepare for the funeral, so I had to do it. Thanks to the help of our relatives, we were able to send off our mother somehow. After our mother's death, my sister started working part-time and moved out of our family home to live alone. Since her part-time income wasn't enough to pay the rent, our father covered the rent and utility bills, and it seemed my sister spent the money she earned on having fun. When her part-time income wasn't enough, she would go to our father and ask for an allowance. When our mother was alive, She'd been strict with my sister, so our father didn't give her any allowance after she started working. But now he was giving her as much as she wanted. I thought it was no problem if both my father and sister were happy with that arrangement. Even after I got married and started living with my husband in my family home, my father continued giving my sister an allowance. At that time, I didn't realize that my sister was also asking my husband for money, and he was happily giving it to her. Being unable to say no to my beautiful sister, my husband would secretly give her money, saying, "Don't tell Julie about this. She might get jealous if she finds out." My sister would only work part-time when she felt like it and live off the money she got from our father and my husband. But her carefree lifestyle didn't last forever, as our father fell ill and had to be hospitalized. I took care of our father during my breaks from work, but my sister never showed up at the hospital. Instead, she started calling me and demanding money. "I've been getting money from Dad every month, so I want you to keep giving it to me. The rent and utilities are all being withdrawn from Dad's account after all." She spoke to me angrily, but I was shocked to learn this for the first time. I got angry at my sister, who only cared about her own life instead of worrying about our hospitalized father. I really wanted to hang up on her, but she seemed to be in trouble, so I asked her how much money our father had been giving her every month. "How much have you been getting from Dad every month? Hurry up and get a job so you can live on the money you earn." My sister replied grumpily, "You're so annoying. I've been getting $1,000 a month. That's not including rent and utilities, by the way." I was appalled by my sister, who boasted about the amount she was receiving. I thought that if our father kept giving such a grown-up sister so much money, that she would lose any motivation to work seriously. I didn't think it was much of a problem to give my sister money, since I believed our father would recover quickly. However, our father's condition suddenly worsened, and I hurriedly contacted our relatives. The doctor told me it was a serious situation, and I was deeply shocked. During times like these, I wanted my husband's support, but he rarely showed up to the hospital, saying he was busy with work. Moreover, when he did visit, he would ask me inappropriate questions like, "Your father's inheritance must be huge, right? Since you and your sister are the only heirs, are you going to split it in half?" I had no words to respond to my husband, who only talked about the inheritance. I realized that what the relatives meant when they said my husband was obsessed with money and felt disgust. When my sister received a call, I explained that our father was in a critical condition, but she only worried about her own finances. "Make sure you pay me my monthly allowance. I can't survive without that money." The call ended abruptly. I was angry at my sister's response, but I was also concerned about the faint male voice I heard on the other end. I recognized the voice and had a bad feeling. About a month later, my father passed away, and neither my sister nor my husband showed up during his last moments. Having experienced my mother's funeral, I realized how heavy-hearted funeral preparations could be. On top of that, neither my sister nor my husband helped at all, and my sister didn't even attend the funeral. My husband did show up at the funeral, but he disappeared immediately afterward, claiming he had work. The relative who introduced me to my husband noticed his absence and asked me about it. "Where's your husband? It's strange for the chief mourner to be absent, isn't it?" All I could do was force a smile and answer, "He seems to be busy with work, so he went back." The relative sighed upon hearing my explanation, and I felt like sighing too. Once the funeral was over and I could finally catch my breath, my husband grinned and asked me, "So, how much did you inherit? Even if you split it in half, you'll get a lot of money, right?" As the relatives had warned before our marriage, my husband seemed to only care about my father's inheritance. Disappointed by my husband's true nature, I gave him an evasive answer. "My sister gets $1 billion and I get zero." We haven't talked to the lawyer yet, and I haven't had time to process my feelings since the funeral just ended. Seeing my husband happily talking about the inheritance, I felt laughing out of anger. Believing my words, my husband yelled, "What? You can't inherit any property? I don't need you anymore. Let's divorce right now." I felt the same way, so I retorted, "Let's do that. You only married me for your father's inheritance in the first place. I'll divorce you." With that, I shoved the prepared divorce papers in front of my husband. As if anticipating this, I took out the divorce papers, which seemed to surprise him a bit, but he signed them anyway. After signing the divorce papers, my husband left the house saying, "I'll divorce you, who gets zero inheritance, and marry your sister to get the $1 billion." I didn't care and immediately went to the city hall to submit the divorce papers. I was able to leave my terrible husband. My ex-husband submitted his marriage registration with my sister the very next day. A few days later, my ex-husband called me. Still believing that story, he yelled, "When are you going to start the inheritance procedures? Give Mary her $1 billion already." I had been waiting for my ex-husband to contact me. I didn't want to reach out to him after he left our house. I replied to my ex-husband in a business-like tone, "Let's have a discussion at my place this Sunday. I'm preparing for the procedure and waiting for you." Brian, my ex-husband, was thrilled at the thought of receiving an inheritance and hung up the phone, but I was looking forward to seeing his face when he found out the truth. Over the weekend, my ex-husband and my sister Mary came to our parents' house, and both of them were surprised that I had called a lawyer. However, Brian seemed to convince himself and said, "I guess we need a lawyer when we're inheriting a large amount of the money." Then the lawyer, with a puzzled look, started talking to Brian. "There is a matter of inheritance, but before that, there is a matter of a claim for compensation from Julie, your ex-wife, towards you, Brian." He showed Brian several photos. In those photos, Brian was coming out of Mary's house, and the date was clearly written. The lawyer continued talking to Brian. "Since these are photos proving infidelity before the divorce, you have to pay compensation." When I heard Brian talking about the inheritance over the phone with Mary, I immediately asked the lawyer to investigate Brian's infidelity. Maybe he thought I was too busy with my father's funeral, but Brian and Mary met at Mary's house almost every day, and thanks to that, I was able to get many evidence photos. The conversation about inheritance turned into a conversation about compensation, and both Mary and Brian were speechless. But Brian quickly recovered and retorted, "Compared to the 100 million inheritance, compensation is just a small amount. I'll pay it right away." When the lawyer handed him the compensation claim documents, he signed them easily. After confirming that, I told Brian, "I'll make sure you pay the compensation since you've signed it. But be happy with Mary, who has zero inheritance." The moment Mary heard zero inheritance, she screamed, "What do you mean my inheritance is zero? I'm supposed to have 100 million. Brian's face turned red, and he got angry, saying, "There's no way there's zero inheritance. I won't let you take it all for yourself." The lawyer calmly started explaining to the angry pair. "Mary is the daughter of your late mother from a previous marriage, and since she has not been legally adopted by your late father, there is no legal parent-child relationship. Therefore, Mary cannot inherit your father's estate." I also told Mary, who seemed to be confused, "I don't think you remember because you were only 1 year old when our parents got remarried, but I remember it clearly. I was 6 years old when our parents remarried, and I remember being happy that I suddenly had a sister. I never thought that such a sister would steal my husband." Both our parents were struggling with young children and had someone mediate between them, thinking it would be best for them to remarry. My mother treated me like her real daughter, and my father treated Mary with care. My father might have spoiled Mary because she was not his real daughter, and he wanted to be extra careful with her. Our parents each had a child when they remarried, and my mother, who was suspected by relatives of marrying my wealthy father for his money, refused to have Mary legally adopted by him. The reason the relatives kept recommending marriage proposals to me was that they knew I was the only one who could inherit my father's estate. If our parents had had a child together, things might have gotten even more complicated, but fortunately or unfortunately, they didn't have any children. They might have decided not to have children to avoid future inheritance disputes. It has now become clear that our father continued to support my sister financially after she became an adult because he couldn't pass on his inheritance to her. I am not legally related to my mother because we did not go through adoption, but it never bothered me in daily life. It seemed our parents never told my sister that they were both remarried, and she found out the truth for the first time that day. My ex-husband's face changed from red to pale as soon as he realized the situation. He signed the documents and was even asked to pay for damages when he couldn't get the inheritance he had been expecting from my sister. With a blue face, my ex-husband said to me, "Was what you said about my sister getting $10 billion and me getting nothing a lie?" Holding back laughter, I said, "Of course it was a lie. It was to get back at you for cheating on me behind my back. Besides, there's no way Dad's inheritance was worth $10 million. Even our wealthy father didn't have an inheritance of $10 million. My sister, who had been silent until now, suddenly screamed, "I've made a lot of purchases relying on Dad's inheritance. What will happen to the money he used to give me? Will you pay for me, big sister?" I answered my frightened sister. "You have a reliable husband now, so you don't need it anymore, right? Have Brian support you." My sister looked at my pale-faced ex-husband, but he shook his head. "I also have made various purchases expecting the inheritance. So I don't have the means to support you. Besides, I have to pay for damages, so I'm barely managing myself." After saying that, my ex-husband suddenly knelt down in front of me and started apologizing. "Julie, I'm sorry. It was my fault. Will you forgive me and take me back?" The lawyer, who had been watching, laughed while packing up to leave. His arrogant attitude from earlier was gone, and he looked ridiculous kneeling down. After the discussion, my ex-husband and sister left with their heads down, and they soon got divorced. For my ex-husband, who remarried with the intention of inheriting my sister's assets, he was no longer interested in her when she didn't receive the inheritance. He told me he couldn't take care of my sister because he had to pay me damages. Since my ex-husband had no property, we agreed that he would pay the damages in installments from his monthly salary. The lawyer advised that this way I wouldn't miss out on anything. My sister, now without our father's support, worked part-time every day, but she couldn't pay off her debts and ended up filing for bankruptcy. She eventually had to leave her apartment, and no one knows where she went. Our father had supported my sister out of love, but in the end he spoiled her too much, and she became unable to work seriously. Later, a relative tried to introduce me to a potential marriage partner again while I started living alone in my childhood home, but I declined. I don't want to be introduced to someone like my ex-husband again, so this time I want to find a suitable marriage partner on my own.
Excuse me, but my card doesn't seem to be working. We urge you to sell your outstanding balance promptly. Otherwise, your card will remain unusable. What? The call center operator from the card company had indeed mentioned outstanding balance. It seems that the payment from my usual credit card hasn't gone through yet. Why though? I should have a substantial amount saved in the account linked for automatic payments. But upon checking my bank account, the balance read $0. The only other person who could have withdrawn money from it would be my husband. So I reached for my mobile phone and immediately reported it to the police. My name is Garnet Felton, and I'm 30 years old. I work at my own pace as a freelance web designer. Since my job allows me to work from home, I often visit clients directly for meeting. While most of the meetings could technically be held online, I prefer talking to clients in person to relay my ideas. When a deadline approaches, I work long hours and often forgo sleep. The reason I can keep up with this job is due to my husband's support. I got married to Thomas a year ago. A few years back, when I was assigned to a project at a company, he was the representative I spoke with. We were in a relationship for a year and a half before we got married. After our marriage, he moved into my apartment. Despite all this, there's one major problem in my life which concerns Thomas's parents. They are a bit casual with their spending and always seem to be short on money. Thomas and I split all our living expenses. Since I earn more, I usually pay all the expenses for the month, and then he reimburses me half at the beginning of the next month. However, when I informed Thomas about this month's expenses as usual, he grimaced and said,
"Listen, money's a bit tight this month. Can I pay my share of the living expenses after my next paycheck?"
"What? What do you mean by tight? I'm only asking for half of the living expenses."
Yeah, I know, but I'm totally out of cash until the next payday.
What do you mean? It's only been 10 days since payday.
Well, I have some stuff to take care of for my parents.
For your parents? His evasive attitude and refusal to explain clearly began to frustrate me. His intentional vagueness made me probe further. Hey, can you explain properly why can't you pay? And what's this about taking care of your parents?
Well, that is...
Is there something you're guilty about?
No, not at all. I just helped out my mom and dad.
Helped out?
Yes, they said they were struggling, so I just sent them some money.
Thomas's parents are supposed to be working. My father-in-law had a full-time job, and my mother-in-law works part-time, so why did he need to send them money? I couldn't quite wrap my head around this and asked the question that had been gnawing at me. Why do your parents need financial aid even though they're working? There was never any need for this before?
I have been sending them money all along. They just asked me to increase the amount starting this month.
You didn't actually agree to increase the amount, did you?
Yes, I did. What's the issue? If my parents are in trouble, it's natural to help them out.
Fine. Just make sure to pay when you get your paycheck at the end of the month, okay? My husband can be quite stubborn once he's set his mind to something. I love him, but his obstinate side does cause some issues. I didn't think saying more would change his mind, nor would he genuinely apologize. I decided to hold off on pressing further and wait patiently until the next payday. Ever since that incident, he began finding excuses not to contribute to our household expenses. Even if he did contribute, it was only about a third of the amount. It's been almost 6 months since he started refusing to pay. While we're still technically married, my patient is wearing thin. Even though I'm bearing all the expenses, all the household chores are also up to me. Thinking about it made me feel foolish and overwhelmed with emptiness. One late night, he came home. His face was flushed, clearly tipsy. I couldn't help but raise my voice. Hey, if you are going to be out drinking, why didn't you call? I made dinner and waited for you.
Oh, sorry. A colleague invited me out unexpectedly.
But you could at least send a message, right? I've told you before to let me know.
Don't yell as soon as I get home. Feels unwelcome.
What's that supposed to mean? Why am I the one getting blamed? He looked at me with disdain as if I was the bad guy. I was infuriated by his attitude and confronted him. Why can you afford to go out drinking when you can't even pay our bills?
I can have a drink once in a while. I'm tired from working every day.
So am I. I do all the household chores. If you can't contribute anymore, can we stop sending money to your parents?
What? Why? This is my family's matter. It's none of your business.
What about us, Thomas? Aren't we family too? What am I to you living here with you after we got married?
Oh, so annoying. What does it matter? You make more money than I do anyway.
Why is he acting so superior? The only reason Thomas can live comfortably is because I am covering all the bills. Wouldn't a simple thank you or sorry for the inconvenience be appropriate? I was at a loss for words, facing his unreasonable arguments. I couldn't comprehend how he could be so arrogant. Given our heated tempers, I figured a calm discussion wasn't possible and said, "Let's talk again tomorrow." The next day, as I prepared dinner, waiting for him, I heard the front door open. "Welcome home." I called from the kitchen, but there was no reply. Then the living room door opened and in walked my husband with his parents. Mom? Dad? Why are you here?" With a smug grin, my husband said,
My parents have something they want to discuss with you.
"Discuss with me?"
Come on, Mom and Dad, get straight to the point, haha.
Encouraged by my husband, my father-in-law began looking apologetic.
Sorry for the sudden visit. We came to discuss the money Thomas has been sending us.
What's this about?
Garnet, can you please stop tormenting Thomas?
Taken aback, I blurted out, "What?" I was utterly bewildered. Then my mother-in-law, who had been quiet, spoke up. "Garnet, Thomas has been sending us money every month thinking of our well-being. It's unfair for you to blame him." What are you talking about? Harassment, blame? All I want is for our living expenses to be paid properly. Listen, Grenade, I hate to say this, but we're like in-laws to you, right? If your family's struggling, wouldn't you want to help? What? That's what anyone would think, right? Your father-in-law and I, we have been tight on money recently, so we expect Thomas to continue sending us money. That means you should cover the living expenses for both of you. They seemed to think it was only natural for me to cover all the costs. Not able to stand it anymore, I told them off. Enough is enough. What do you think I am, doing all the housework and covering all the living expenses? How is that fair? It's what married couples do, isn't it? What? Married couples support each other, right? Or are you just that greedy? Hearing his mother's provocation, my husband next to me couldn't help but laugh. That night, no matter what I said, they didn't listen. They only left after 9 p.m. After they left, my husband suddenly handed me a signed divorce paper. In disbelief, I asked, "What is this?"
It means exactly what it looks like.
Looking down at me, he said,
If you keep defying me, I'll divorce you.
"Are you serious?"
Of course. If you don't want a divorce, just do as you're told. Your role is to follow, not lead.
I should have stood up for myself, but I was too drained. Maybe it's pointless talking to Thomas. Before the burden grows, maybe I should consider divorce too. Making up my mind was quick. The next day, I signed the divorce papers Thomas gave me and headed to the city hall. The papers were accepted, and just like that, I was single again. Now I'm free. I'll move out and start living on my own soon. Feeling refreshed, I decided to go shopping at the department store. Since I usually work from home and only go out for meetings, it's been a while since I shopped for myself. Especially recently, since I had to cover all the expenses, I hadn't been able to buy anything for myself. Today, I'm going to treat myself. With that thought, I headed to the women's clothing section. I tried on a few dresses and decided to buy two. At the checkout, when I handed over my credit card, the cashier gave me a troubled look. I'm sorry, ma'am. It seems we can't use this card." What? That can be. We've tried a few times, but it just won't process. That's impossible. The last time I used the card was to buy a new tablet for work. I had no problems with online payment then, so why now? Rushing home, I decided to call the card company. After explaining the situation to the operator, she gave me shocking news. "We need you to pay the outstanding amount immediately or your card will be unusable." What? Outstanding amount? Yes, as of last month, we couldn't deduct the card's usage from your account. That's impossible. Please check your bank account balance. After hanging up the phone, I checked my bank account online to see the balance, which my card draws funds from. I've been using this account for savings since I was single, but now it's solely for my card's transaction. If I remember correctly, there should be $5 million in there, but my balance showed zero. Just before the card's due date, all $5 million was withdrawn. What's going on? Why? A chilling suspicion crossed my mind. Could it have been Thomas? But who else could it be? Our bank book and ATM card are kept together, accessible only to the both of us. Meaning Thomas was the only other person who could withdraw from my account? I waited for him to come home, then confronted him. "Hey, did you take money from my account?" He smirked, exhaled loudly, and responded, seeming quite annoyed.
Oh, you found out? Thought I did a pretty good job hiding it, huh?
"I can't believe it. Why would you do that?"
Why? For my parents, obviously. I gave them your $5 million.
What did you just say?
Like I said, they asked for financial support. Lucky for them, I have a financial source.
Financial source? Lost for words, he started explaining with a proud tone. It seemed his parents had been obsessed with shopping online recently. They kept buying stuff that they liked. Their spending was way beyond their income. Up until now, they had been asking Thomas for financial support, but now they were at a point where they couldn't manage anymore. Things escalated when they realized they could demand more. They started buying multiple of the same items and gave them away to neighbors. Before they knew it, their monthly payment was over $500,000, and Thomas couldn't cover it anymore, so he withdrew the $5 million from my account.
Once he was done explaining, he said, "You shouldn't have any complaints, right? They're also your family. Think of it as taking care of them. Stop fussing about a mere $5 million.
In that moment, I found myself dialing the police on my cell. Hello? Police? I want to report a break-in and theft. My address is... Thomas watched me with wide eyes. As I ended the call, he shouted,
Hey, what did you just call?
Didn't you hear? The police.
Police? Why would you call them? And break-in and theft?
That's you, right?
What? Calling it theft is way over the top. And break-in? This is my house.
I sternly told the flustered Thomas, we are not a couple anymore. Actually, I'm the one renting this place, so technically it's not your home, is it?
We're not a couple?
Remember the divorce papers you so kindly filled out yesterday? I already submitted them. So in other words, this is my place and you are just a stranger here, an intruder, right?
You've got to be kidding me. Call them back and cancel the report.
Waving my phone at him angrily, I threatened, if you lay a finger on me, I'll call the cops again. Just so you know, they're already on their way. You can't run now. Why don't you just admit what you have done?
Whoa, wait. We loved each other, didn't we? Why is this happening?
Loved each other? I scoffed. Don't give me that crap. Whose fault do you think all of this is? It all started because you blindly supported your reckless parents. You can't just do as you please and expect to be forgiven. Who would forgive someone as awful as you? What a fool.
Fool? Who do you think you're talking to?
To you. Like parents, like child, because you were raised by parents who were careless with money. You think it's okay to empty someone else's savings? I hope the police give you a good lecture and you will feel the weight of that $5 million. Just then, the police arrived and Thomas crumbled on the spot.
Who's the person in question?
Pointing at my husband now cowering on the floor, I said, it's him.
All right, get up. We'll need to take you in for questioning. All I wanted was to care for my parents.
But his pleas went unanswered, and Thomas was taken away by the police. However, the incident was deemed a civil matter, and the police informed me that they couldn't intervene. So I visited a law firm and demanded compensation for the misused savings of $5 million plus damages, totaling $6 million. Of course, Thomas and his parents didn't have that kind of money. In the end, all three ended up in debt. Despite their financial struggles, his parents continued their impulsive shopping sprees, leading to an ever-growing debt. They even turned to loan sharks. Rumors has it they now live in fear of daily debt collection, trying to stay hidden. On the other hand, I decided to completely cut ties with Thomas and moved to a new apartment. Thankfully, my work started flourishing and I now earn more than I could have ever imagined. After breaking up with Thomas, everything in my professional life fell into place. I wished I had divorced him earlier. Even though my marriage was a failure, I knew my life was far from over. Learning from this mistake, I am determined to be more cautious in the future.